We learn so much more from adverse situations and negative experiences than we do from positive ones. If you're in the rough, that is opportunity. It is providing you so much opportunity to learn more about who you are as a person and who you are as a player. My job as a psychologist and as a performance consultant is to have my athletes and players truly believe these not so good experiences are good for you and that they're opportunity and that they should be welcomed and embraced.
Welcome to the Golf Yourself Healthy podcast, where deep, meaningful and philosophical conversations about golf and life are par for the course. Here at GYH, we are committed to inspiring you to use golf as a means of overcoming adversity, building resilience and learning vital life skills which can be applied both on and off the course. If you want to be part of our community, a community which shares a love for golf and a desire to support each other to live happier, healthier and more fulfilled lives, then please use the Substack link provided in the show notes to subscribe for free to become our latest community member and get free access to exclusive member-only content, including a video version of this episode, as well as monthly journal articles and exclusive discounts with partner golf brands. Today's guest is Rashmeen Nirmal, registered psychologist and founder of Golf PhD, an evidence-based performance firm which has the goal of supporting golfers of all abilities to achieve optimal well-being and mental health, as well as to become equipped with the skills and behaviours needed to succeed in golf and indeed in day-to-day life. Through Golf PhD, Rashmeen is on a mission to raise awareness around mental health in golf, a mission which is influenced by Rashmeen's own personal experiences, as well as what she has identified as some of the unique, deep-rooted and often traumatic issues which impact the mental health of elite athletes throughout their careers. In this episode, Rashmeen offers some unique tips on how to free up your mind on the golf course and rid yourself of the common doubts or anxieties which can creep into your mind midway through a round, as well as how to be not only mentally but also physically and logistically prepared to play your best golf. By the time you're done listening, hopefully you'll feel not only better prepared for golf, but also better prepared for life on life's terms. Without any further ado, let's tee off and jump into the conversation. So let's start off. Let's get to know Rashmeen, both as the golfer and then as the professional. And I guess you're going to talk to both because they kind of coexist together and they both talk to each other, right, in terms of what you do and the work you do. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how much time do we have? Just kidding.
As much as you need.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a golfer. I played college golf in Florida at Nova Southeastern University, and played on the women's golf team there. And then I went on to graduate school and did my master's and PhD in school in applied child psychology, and now practice as a registered psychologist here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm at our children's hospital, and then I have a small boutique private practice where I do assessment, but I've also folded in supporting athletes with their performance in sport. It started off with golfers, and I think there's a bit of a need. So I work with soccer players and dancers and football player. And so it's been really, really neat to marry the two concepts of being a golfer and being a neurodevelopmental psychologist and providing support to athletes.
Yeah. Well, then talk a little bit about, and I suppose what I'm about to ask you should naturally lead us into you talking about Golf PhD. But, you know, how is your professional academic background, your skill set being brought to life in a golf context?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So it was pretty early on in my graduate studies where there was a light bulb moment, and I thought to myself, wow, there is a lot of overlap between psychology and neuroscience in golf. from a learning perspective. So just for your listeners to know, a neurodevelopmental psychologist is someone who focuses on how our behavior, how our feelings, how our emotions affect what we do in our learning, be it sport, be it work, be it the educational system. And so then I thought to myself, golf really is a game of science. It's a game of science, and we can really tap into understanding the science of human behavior and applying that to the golf game. So that's one strand of Golf PhD. And then the other strand is supporting the mental health aspect of athletes. And so there's a lot more conversation around the mental health needs of athletes and how that needs to be taken into account to a greater degree. And so with Golf PhD, my job and my goal is to increase mental health awareness in sports, but more importantly, provide capacity building, provide tools, accessible tools and skills to athletes, to coaches, to parents and caregivers in order to support the athlete. Because I think a lot of emphasis is on the athlete, but there are so many systems around the athlete that really impact the skill and behavior and the mental health well-being of the athlete. So that's the goal of Golf PhD and how that came about in terms of marrying the two concepts. I hope that made sense.
So a lead-on question is around, so when you talk about working with athletes, what kind of level are we talking about in a golf context again that they're performing at? Are they again kind of like collegiate athletes? Are they playing to quite a high level, aspiring to be elite, or is it a bit mixed?
Good question. So it is, I would say when I started Golf PhD, it was mostly the elite athletes reaching out and tour players reaching out, which I thought was really interesting. Now I have more juniors reaching out, more new to golf reaching out. And so I don't sort of discriminate in terms of the player, because the essence of Golf PhD is to provide skill and understanding and to help the client, help the athlete become their own best coach. So to that end, I think it's amazing that new to golf and junior players are interested in improving their mental game, because the earlier we start, the more likely we're going to circumvent issues or prevent issues like burnout or anxiety, or more serious things like depression or even suicidal ideation that we unfortunately see in high performance sport. So sort of in summary, it's been more elite athletes, now bridging into more casual athletes. But at any level, it's really helpful, I would say. And the skills very much generalized not only on the golf course, but to life and other aspects of life. And when we have those pieces in place, there's spillover effect, right? The more resilient we are in life, at work, in our family, in our day-to-day interactions, that all propels us to feel more equipped and resilient as an athlete on the golf course. So I like to say, when I'm working with parents at the hospital, children don't grow up in a vacuum. It is not this linear tube of development. It is up and down and up and down and up and down. But if the trend line is positive, that's what we're aiming for, right? But along that positive trend line, there's going to be ups and downs. And it's those downs that help us the most, ironically, right? And so we're shifting our mindset. If everything's roses every single day, we're not going to learn much from that. We're not going to learn how to do things differently. We're not going to learn how to adapt or how to face adversity, being calm and cool, and with feeling empowered with the skills to face adversity. So we need to face adversity in life in order to develop, to evolve as a person and as an athlete.
Absolutely, without question. Why do you believe that you talked about raising mental health awareness? Why for you is that so important to do again in golfing environments?
Oh, yeah. This is a big question. There's so many layers to it, Chris. Personal layers, professional layers to this. So reflecting back on my performance as a golfer, I would say near the end of my college career, there was one aspect of my game that really was the demise of my game. It sounds so dramatic, but it really was, and that was the bunker game. And I remember going into, say the ninth hole, being maybe 1 to 2 under par, and then getting in the bunker around the green and making it just being a blow up hole. And when you go from like 1 under, 2 under to like 5 over after one hole, it is so defeating. It is so defeating. And I just remember, I think I had my eyes on graduate school at that point. So perhaps maybe I didn't put in the right technical time it needed to fix the bunker game, but I really do think it's more mindset now, because I still have the same issue with it. But I had a bunker lesson and my coach was like, you have that, you're fine. Like, but then once he put me on the course, it's like, I don't know what to do when I'm in the bunker still, like 20 years later. But I remember like the mental health piece of it, just feeling defeated and not feeling supported. And I'm, there's no blame whatsoever, but just not feeling supported. Even if I was supported, not feeling supported, and just burning out, because when you put in so much effort into something and you're not getting that desired outcome, that expectation that you put into place, it's a really hard place to be in. And when you don't have the tools to get out of that, then things just kind of turn into, fried egg, no pun intended, because fried eggs and bunkers, right? So that was probably my first stage of burnout in life. I've had 2. And then I went on to graduate school. And for my master's thesis, I did a program evaluation for a program called Respect in Sport. And Respect in Sport is a program designed for coaches and parents to recognize signs of bullying, abuse, neglect, harassment in sport. And it is absolutely prevalent, those 4 concepts in sport, unfortunately. And so this program was developed by a former NHL hockey player, Sheldon Kennedy, who played for the Calgary Flames and a few other sports. And this is all public knowledge, so it's not breaching any form of confidentiality. But he was sexually molested by his junior coach over 300 times. And so remarkably, Sheldon was still able to play, high performance hockey and despite having those traumatic experiences, but it did lead to things like substance use disorder and mental health challenges. And so once he sort of, I don't want to say recovered from that, but once he was able to reflect on that, so to speak, he developed this program with the Canadian Red Cross. And now it's mandatory across many sport organizations in Canada for parents and caregivers to take. And to recognize their own power that they have in the development of an athlete and how easy it is for that power to be misused. Now, with that coach, that's an extreme example, right? But it happens, unfortunately, more than we know. And, we hear about the gymnastics coach and Simone Biles and, athletes are feeling more empowered to share their stories and their lived experience. So that was another reason, another layer. And then the third layer about why this conversation is so important is that it is such a juxtaposition. Like, it is so interesting that such a high-performing athlete who has a fierce lion-like mindset can have such significant mental health issues. And to me, that's not right. That's not right. You even look at like young celebrities, it's not right that they've got this talent, this gift, yet they are struggling so deeply inside, and some to a point of suicide. Last year there was a gentleman on the PGA Tour that ended his life, and rest in peace, Grayson Murray. And that to me is so unfortunate when we have such a gifted individual, where I do think society as a whole views them as this fictional character. They provide entertainment, they provide motivation to others. Yet sometimes I think we forget that they're people, right? And they're people that have the same human experience of adversity and mental health challenges, yet they're expected to push through that. And so that's kind of the other layer, is the layer of this needs to be addressed. And I think it is, but certainly not at the degree of how much we support the technical aspects of sport, right? If you think about how much goes into the technical, we got putting coaches, we've got like driving coaches, we've got strength and conditioning coaches, physiotherapists, RMTs. And there's very few that have a psychologist or a performance coach. And so I love your work, Chris, because it's creating this conversation. And I am seeing more and more of it. But it's not anyone's fault and no one's to blame. It's just a lack of conversation, a lack of capacity building, skill building, and understanding that these issues are very, very real. And they've been real for so long.
One of the questions, I think, as you know, that I wanted to ask you then is bringing this back to Golf PhD, bringing it back to the people, the clients, the athletes that you're working with. Mm-hmm. So what are the key themes that are coming out of some of the work that you're doing? Yeah. Some of the sound bites almost, and obviously not expecting you to name examples or break confidentiality or anything like that, but almost just to enlighten us and our listeners with what are you hearing and what might it mean for us as golfers?
I've been thinking about that question. The first thing that comes to mind is the need for structure. I think that there are many people that want to work on their mental game, but don't know how, and aren't going about it in a systematic way. So when you're fine-tuning something in a sport, maybe you're going through a swing change or you're switching putters, you're going to have a systematic approach to that. You're going to be working with your coach. You're going to be videotaping. You're going to be rewatching the videos. You're going to be tweaking. You're going to be using that club in different elements, different weather. But I'm not seeing that translate to the mental game. And there are more and more performance coaches on social media, and I think athletes can pick up little snippets of support through that, and those snippets can be helpful, without a doubt. Will they be sustainable over time is the question. And so what I'm seeing is a real lack of a systematic structural approach to supporting your mental game. And so a lot of my work is putting in those structures for the athletes, those routines, those micro habits that they can build into their game, both on and off the course, that will help their mental game, if that makes sense. That's the biggest thing that I'm seeing. I'm also seeing athletes reach out at a point where it's like a tipping point. It's like, I just had a panic attack last week, or I walked off the golf course, or I want to quit soccer, or I don't know if I can go on that football scholarship. So they're coming to me at a tipping point where it's almost like, and I don't believe in the notion of too late, but I would love to work more at the prevention level and give folks tools before they're reaching this tertiary level of needing support. So that's another pattern coming to me when it's like, when they're almost in crisis, and feeling very at their wit's end or feeling really defeated. So that's another pattern that I'm seeing.
Really interesting. Couple of questions in on that. So first of all, if on the first one, it's putting those structures in place.
Yeah.
And again, not to almost put you on the spot or kind of ask too much of I don't intend it to be like a controversial question, because again, I have a theory on the question I'm about to ask you, which is why do you think those structures are not in place in golf already? Because to me, what you're saying suggests that there's a gap somehow, and maybe it needs someone of your subject matter expertise to come in and fill that gap. Because it's perhaps a stretch for us to expect teaching PGA pros, to your earlier point, who are technical experts in driving and, X, Y, Z on the technical side of the game, but they can't be everything. So
right.
I don't know, is it something along those lines, or is that why that gap exists, or some other reason?
Well, that's a big question, Chris. I think the gap.
Rashmeen, I'm all you could probably know by now. I'm a big question kind of guy.
You are. We
so
talk about all day. Why does that gap exist? It's historical, right? It goes back to everything we've been talking about in this episode. That the win at all cost mentality really in some ways doesn't allow for structures to be in place, if that makes sense. And so I want to unpack structures and what I mean by that. And so when we look at neuroscience, and this is where where I kind of married the two concepts. My job as a psychologist, like a neurodevelopmental psychologist, is to make learning more accessible for learners. So people with dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, etc. My job and my ambition is to provide learning opportunities for those folks that are as equitable as possible to folks without neurodiverse conditions. And so what I mean by that is, how do we take off the cognitive load for some of these students? And so taking that to golf, how do I take off the cognitive load for players? Because golf is so cognitive. And what I mean by cognitive, it is so in your head. There's so much thinking going on subconsciously and consciously, and emotional memory, all of these really neuroscientific concepts that are going on whether you know it or not. So my job now as a performance-based consultant in sport is, how do we take off the cognitive load in golf so that you can focus on playing your best? And so what that means is the systems and the structures. Your golf bag should be totally organized, so you know where everything is. Tiger Woods, apparently his golf bag is like meticulous. And why is it meticulous? Because then he's got a caddy, but he doesn't need to think about, okay, well, where's my 7-iron? Where's this? Where is my glove? It's just there. And so you're taking off the cognitive load. So you should have routines in place. The players should have routines in place. They should have their morning routine before practice and play. They should have a routine at their locker. They should have their pre-shot routine, post-shot routine, pre-putt routine. And it might sound like a lot, like I say all these structures and routines, but once you have them in place, they become routinized and you don't think about them. And then they actually become your anchor. So what happens when we're starting to play bad? We naturally drift away from our anchors. We drift away from our pre-shot routines. We drift away from things that we have in place because people are just over it. They're like, I'm not even going to take a practice swing. I'm just going to go up and I'm going to snap hook this into the water, right? Like it goes out the window. But if you have those routines in place and you stick to them, those are what's going to take off that cognitive load so you can stay present on the shot in front of you. I hope that makes sense. That was kind of a mouthful.
No, it does. No, it does. I absolutely, okay, so again, you're going to make me want to nerd out here on cognitive load. Can you describe in almost lay terms to my listener what we're talking about when we talk about cognitive load?
In simple terms. Oh, that's hard. So, said in a simple way, we've got different regions in our brain, different lobes. The frontal lobe, particularly your prefrontal cortex, so the very, very front of your brain, that is the last part of your brain to develop. So it actually doesn't develop until, some studies are now showing mid to late 20s. And that frontal part of your brain is responsible in part for a term called executive functioning. And said in a simple way, executive functioning is like the CEO of your brain or the advanced secretary of your brain. It is important for skills like controlling your emotions, planning ahead in a sequential manner, organizing your thoughts and your belongings, shifting flexibly from one thought to another or from one task to another, self-monitoring skills, so monitoring your behavior and how it impacts yourself and how it impacts others, impulse control, big one in sport, so being able to stop and think before acting. It's responsible for completing tasks in a timely manner, starting tasks in a timely manner, and engaging in work-checking behaviors. So engaging in reflection of your work or checking of your work. So in a traditional school setting, check your spelling. In sport, it could be using your post-round journal to reflect on your game. And so if you think about all of those skills and how they don't develop fully, they start developing in infancy, but they continue to develop and kind of peak closer to 30. That in essence is cognitive load. And it's all those tasks that your brain is like you said, all these processes simultaneously trying to manage. Working memory is another one. So it's just a fancy word for short-term memory, your brain's ability to hold small pieces of information in immediate memory in order to complete a task. And so executive functions, they're responsible for so many things in life. If you think about it, it's such an umbrella term that's so important for sport and your day-to-day living and for work. And so that would be a good way of describing cognitive load, would be things like executive functions. And so and if you think about it, executive functions really maps on well to structures and routines, right? We look at planning, organization, starting tasks, completing tasks, work checking behavior. All of those things are way easier to do when you have systems in place. When you don't have systems or patterns in place, then it's like a little maze, right? So that's what I mean by cognitive load.
So one area in which I start thinking about cognitive load applying in a golf context are swing thoughts, for example, or just your overall setup. Because you hear tour pros talking about it all the time. I've even heard Rory McIlroy talk about how there was a point in time a couple of years ago where he said, what's going on in my head is just a bit like soup at the moment, because it's kind of, I'm doing these swing changes and it's like I've got too many swing thoughts, quote unquote. And I almost wonder then, is there anything that you would share with the listener? Maybe it's not as straightforward as this, and that's fine, but I just wanted to ask, is there any sort of tip or thing that we can do that would almost help us, especially us average golfers, to kind of quiet the brain almost, and just, I don't know, is it like narrow things down just to a couple of things?
For sure. So when we are engaging in a negative cycle of thoughts, it can be really, really hard to get out of that. And what happens is our body can go through physiological changes, physical changes. So that could be an increase in heart rate, sweaty palms, clenching our hands, not realizing it, shoulders up. So one simple technique is to recognize what your body is doing first. And so if you sense that you're clenched up like this, that's a clue that you're feeling really worked up. So what you can do is actively tense and release. And these things are really easy to do on the golf course, right? You can actively tense and release. So that's it's called progressive muscle relaxation, because we want to get your system out of like a fight or flight response, right? Because essentially that's what's happening internally. And so a good way to do that is that controlled muscle contraction and release. Another way to reduce your heart rate or lower your heart rate, and they do this in the military, is that your out breath should be longer than your in breath. So that's another easy one to do. So you'll want to really inhale through the belly for 2 counts and then exhale longer for 4 counts. The longer exhale is what's going to lower your heart rate. So it's so much easier to think straight when internally and externally your body has relaxed. And then and it doesn't take long. It does not take long. Research shows that even 1 minute of controlled breathing can make a huge difference. And so we calm the body, and then what we want to do is apply a bite of self-compassion. Because we tend to really beat ourselves up, right? And maybe that comes down to survival of the fittest, right? You just got to go, like there's a pack of wolves over there and the caveman, he's just got to go. But a bite of self-compassion. And that could sound like, I'm feeling really nervous right now. And that's okay. Of course I would feel nervous right now. Maybe it's first tee nerves. Maybe you're paired with another player and you're not a real big fan of the guy, but it's men's night and you're with that player, or it's, ladies' night and maybe not your favorite player to play with, or maybe you're intimidated by them, or maybe you intimidate them, right? So a bite of self-compassion. This is hard. It's okay that it's hard. And then what we can do, you might then, now that the body's calm, you've been nice to yourself, you can try, if it's needed in that moment, to change that less helpful thought to a helpful thought. So I know this is really hard right now. And at the same time, I know I have the skill to make this happen. I know I have the skill to focus on to the next shot. And so it's almost like these little bites, right? Relax the body, be kind to yourself, give yourself a hug, and then switch that less helpful thought to a more helpful thought. There's this notion of toxic positivity, and you see it a lot. Think positive, think positive, think positive. And yes, it's important to think positive. I like to use the word think helpful. But if you're always thinking positive and you're minimizing the adverse event and that adverse feeling, you're not being authentic and true to yourself and how you're feeling. And so when we don't validate our feelings, there's still something left. There's still something left. That ickiness is still there. Right? Because it's kind of like you're sweeping it under the rug. So it's important to acknowledge the emotion and name the emotion. This is really hard. I'm feeling so angry right now. I can't, you have to label that emotion and then turn it into a helpful thought. Because if you don't, then it's just residual and it's going to be sticky. I'll probably compound.
Yeah, I love that. A few things spring to mind there. I mean, I'm really glad you touched on toxic positivity, because it's something I've been curious about, and you've really expanded on that concept. And I think I was speaking to someone on this podcast recently about how, I was on a golf trip later last year, and a couple of things that you said, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here. So one scenario was if we bundle like pitching, like shots from maybe like 50 to 75 yards, like not short game as in like around the green and stuff, they're hard, right? And they get in my head and I fat them a lot, or but before I've even hit the thing, there's a narrative building in my head, which is saying, you're like, it's that negative outcome that I'm predicting, which is you're either going to thin this thing, you're going to bleed it, or you're going to fat it. Now, where the toxic positivity maybe comes into this, I'm just wondering is, because like you say, I think not the worst thing, but certainly a not so good thing I could do to try and almost feel like I'm counteracting those negative thoughts is to be like, you're going to hit this pure. It's going to be amazing, because actually I don't really have the reason. I think for me, why those shots are difficult at the moment is because I haven't fully developed my processes. I talk about this with my golf coach sometimes. He sort of said to me, he's like, look, we got to work on this together. I am never going to tell you commit and trust the process when I've not even given you a process yet. You don't know how to, so it's like, go easy on yourself. And it's maybe telling yourself, you're going to be okay. No matter what the outcome here, you're going to go home. Your wife's still going to love you. Your daughter's still going to love you, so it's that kind of thinking, which is almost like, it's not this, it's a dreadful outcome if you fat it or you thin it or something. So it's that there's something that you make me think of there. This other one is, I'm going to hold this one, come back to it in a moment with another question I'm going to ask you. Sure. Something you said earlier, a few minutes ago, was about Tiger Woods, his golf bag. Any of us can organize our golf bag in such a way that's going to help reduce that cognitive load. And I love that you touched on that point, because I promised my listeners at some point in time I would unpack this book, which is by Brad Gilbert, tennis coach. Okay. So Andy Murray is one of my sporting heroes, and Brad Gilbert was like one of the first coaches that Andy Murray ever had. And he talks in this book when he works with tour players and stuff, like, or any tennis player, and it applies to golf here as well, is organize your bag before you go with the right snacks, with the right hydration, with the right XYZ, because that is the stuff. It's like the basics, which you can so easily neglect and get wrong. Right. But then when you do that, right, it's going to come and bite you in the ass when you're on the golf course, basically. So why not? Whereas equally, if you do that stuff, it's an understated benefit. I mean, the benefit you can get from it is actually quite, right?
Yeah, so for sure. And even the post-round bag routine, like, you got to throw out the wrappers. You got to throw out the crusty golf glove that's been in there for like ever, like you just, and it's not, you just don't do it once, it's like a routine, you clean your spikes, you put your bag down, you throw everything out. And those things make such a difference, and they make a difference with your confidence. You're going to feel confident if you're rummaging through your bag trying to find your glove, realizing you only have 2 balls, and you're like, oh man, this course is hard. How am I going to keep 2 balls? And so it can really help with confidence when when things are organized and you feel prepared. I remember watching a tournament, a PGA Tour tournament last year on television, and there was unexpected rain. Actually, I don't even know if it was unexpected, but there was a few players playing just in their t-shirts and just getting drenched. And I'm like, that can't be helpful for the mental game, right? Maybe on some level it works for them. But to me, it maybe symbolized kind of a lack of preparedness. And because you can get really thin rain gear, right? That can be effective. So it can really go a long way. That organizational piece can go huge way.
Well, but even the example that you just gave there, you could apply that to the Open, which is played in the UK every year, and it tends to be on links courses, right? And it's often said about the PGA Tour players who pretty much the whole year round play in sort of booming sunshine, glorious conditions. And then for them, that's that one time in the year where they go over there and they're like, what is this? Like, they're so not used to that. Yeah. And actually, sometimes they talk about, to your point around, they got caught short because they didn't bring the right rain gear, or they didn't check the forecast. Equally, there can be few excuses when like the Scottish Open tends to be the tournament that precedes. It's like a Rolex series event,
Okay.
and it's the one that precedes the Open normally. So like use that as prep, whereas
Right.
and a lot of PGA Tour players do.
Okay.
Whereas there's some of them that just fly straight in from North America or wherever, and they're like, I haven't played in these kind of conditions all year round, and then
Right. Well,
Anyway, who am I to stand here and tell a PGA Tour player what to do?
well, you know what? We're all human. And what I've learned through this process of golf PhD is never assume that something is too basic for a player. I've learned that. And so I think it's great. I think we can all learn from each other. And that's why I'm starting the Golf PhD book club that I know you're going to be a part of. I'm so excited for you to join because we can all learn so much from each other, be it tour player or junior player, right? But going back to the rain, I have a post on my social media, and it's about this is why you need to practice and play in the rain, because you will, at some point in your career, many times be faced with elements that are not in your favor. And if you live and work in a predominantly sunny climate, on a rain day there, which doesn't happen very often, you need to go out and play golf. And then I tell my players here who live in the Pacific Northwest, I'm like, you're lucky. You're very, very lucky that you have this experience of playing in different golf elements and where the grass is different and muddy and wet, etc. So you have to jump on those opportunities that maybe you don't want to. You got to do the things you don't want to do. And that includes going out and playing in the rain, because that's what's going to set you apart from other players, is being able to be as neutral as possible when the conditions are not in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. What you've just said will tie us really nicely to embrace the rough, cherish the fairway. That is the tagline for us at Golf Yourself Healthy. And it is, I believe, the reason how you and I got connected, because you picked up on it and you reposted it. And you're the first person to do that. And I just wanted to know, yeah. And again, it just made me think, okay, I've met a fellow deep thinker here, which is wonderful. You said earlier, like, Chris, that's a big question. I was like, hey, that's my modus operandi. Like, Rashmeen, that's what I'm all about. But embrace the rough, cherish the fairway.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Oh, I think it's perfect, first and foremost. It's funny because on one of my personal accounts, I have follow your passion, embrace the process, because the process can often be hard and arduous and ugly. And it's meant to be, right? And that's life. Life is not meant to be a walk in the park. And my father, who was a psychologist, always told me that life is not roses, life is beautiful, and there's heaven, earth. What would he say? Living on earth is like heaven. Like, it's amazing. But at the same time, it's hard. And so when I saw embrace the rough, cherish the fairway, those rough moments in life, those challenges, those adverse experiences, no matter how hard they are in that moment, those experiences are what's going to propel you forward. You might feel like you're moving back a step, but you're actually then moving forward a couple, because we learn so much more from adverse situations in negative experiences than we do from positive ones. Because usually the positive ones we celebrate and we're like, let's go, off we go. It's rare that we sit and we're like, okay, let's think about what made that good. We need to do more of that for sure. So going back to, embrace the rough. Look at, if you're in the rough, that is opportunity. That is opportunity for you to know what club is best to hit out of the rough, how your swing changes in the rough, what you're going to do if your swing, if your club gets caught in the rough going in your, in your backswing. It is providing you so much opportunity to learn more about who you are as a person and who you are as a player. And so I think it's a perfect analogy for golf, and it's a perfect analogy for life, because we learn the most from rough experiences, and they're there to help you. And I think my job as a psychologist and as a performance consultant is to have my athletes and players truly believe that, kind of getting that mindset shift of these not so good experiences are good for you, and that they're opportunity and that they should be welcomed and embraced. And then the second part, that is to celebrate the wins and give yourself credit. I think that it's so hard for high performers to give themselves credit and to really give themselves specific credit. And so that second part of your slogan, you have to embrace those opportunities, good or bad, that are given to you, especially the good ones too, right? And to be grateful and to have gratitude and to give yourself credit.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to subscribe using the Substack link in the show notes to become the latest member of our GYH community. There, you will be able to exchange thoughts and comments on today's episode with other community members, whilst also getting access to exclusive member-only content. Until our next episode, please always remember to embrace the rough and forever cherish the fairway.